Don't look away. Click subscribe, or I'll never leave your screen.
The deepest terror I've learned isn't the sound in the dark, it's the silence that comes after. And that silence, it breathes. It was the quiet that truly broke me. Not the silence of the grave, which has its own morbid comfort, but the impossible, incessant hum from a television that wasn't merely off, but cold. A phantom broadcast, whispering from a dead scream. You almost feel the chill now, don't you? I thought the sound was my mind playing tricks, a cruel echo in the hollow chambers of a house too large for one man, too heavy with memory. I know what you're thinking. A trick of the light, a tired mind, a faulty circuit. But it wasn't. Because when I finally forced myself to investigate, pushing through the suffocating stillness of 3 a.m., the screen, dark and lifeless, pulsed. It shimmered with a face I knew, twisted into something monstrous. This isn't a story about what haunts houses. It's about what haunts us. It's about the impossible reflection of a truth you've tried to bury. I was Arthur Hayes, a creature of meticulous habit, charting the precise coordinates of a life emptied by loss. 47 years old, a solitary man, meticulously arranging books on a shelf, dusting photographs that held ghosts, measuring out spoonfuls of lukewarm tea each night. My world was a neatly constructed cage of routine, designed to keep the chaos, the guilt, at bay. Especially the raw, aching wound left by Emily, my younger sister. Her absence was a constant dull throb beneath my sternum, a secret chord strum only when the house was at its quietest. And my house, isolated on the outskirts of Havenwood, offered nothing but quiet. So much quiet it screamed. You see, it began subtly, a faint murmur from the living room, always around 3 in the morning. A television playing softly, the kind of background noise you'd expect from a late-night show. But my television, an antique I kept more for sentiment than use, had been unplugged for months. No power, no signal, just that insistent phantom sound, a low drone, like muted voices through a thick wall. Each night, I'd tell myself it was the wind, the old pipes, a neighbor's distant set. But the sound was always too close, too distinct, too personal. One night the hum shifted. It became clearer, more insistent, almost a frantic whisper pulling me from the uneasy truce of sleep. I rose, a primal dread coiling in my gut, and crept towards the living room. The room was dark, awash in moonlight, save for the faint, impossible glow emanating from the inert screen of the television. It wasn't on. The power button was dark. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and felt the glass. Cold, utterly cold. But in that dead screen, amidst a swirling, ephemeral static, was the face. Distorted, elongated, as if screaming through water. Familiar, yet utterly wrong. A visage from a dream, or perhaps a nightmare that had finally woken up. This isn't a story about a faulty circuit or an old house settling. This isn't a cheap ghost story. It's about how the past isn't merely memory. Sometimes it broadcasts. And when you finally see what it's broadcasting, you'll understand that some truths are meant to stay buried, but they never truly do. The face. It clung to the static, a phantom limb of light on the cold glass, even as I recoiled, my heart hammering against my ribs. It wasn't the fleeting shadow of a nightmare. It was a defiant stain on reality, impossible and terrifying. For a long moment I simply stood there, paralyzed by the sheer audacity of it. the way it twisted the familiar into the monstrous. Then a surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp, propelled me forward. I ripped the television's cord from the wall socket with a violence born of sheer terror. The screen flickered once, the distorted image momentarily sharpening, a silent scream etched into the pixels, before plunging back into absolute blackness. The silence that followed was not relief, but a suffocating blanket, heavy with unspoken threats. I dragged the monstrosity out of the living room, through the hall, and into the detached garage, wrapping it in an old tarp, as if fabric could contain an impossibility. But the moment the garage door clanked shut, the whispers began again. Not from the television, not explicitly. They were in the air, a faint, insistent murmur just at the edge of hearing, a subliminal frequency that grated on my nerves. It was a subtle shift, you see. The sounds were no longer external. They felt like they were vibrating from within my skull. You can almost feel that buzzing in your ears now, can't you? Sleep became a battlefield, each night a surrender to the relentless siege of phantom noises. The faint hum, the almost words, the distant, undistinguishable broadcast, they haunted the periphery of my awareness. My carefully constructed routines began to fray. I'd find myself staring at blank walls, listening, always listening for the impossible sound. Was it the wind? The old house groaning under its weight? Or was it something else? Something far more sinister burrowing deeper into the quiet crevices of my mind. Every creak, every rustle of leaves outside took on a sinister resonance, each a potential prelude to the return of that face. Then, one evening, while making my usual solitary dinner, the kitchen light flickered. Just once. And in the polished surface of the stainless steel refrigerator, I saw it again. Faintly. Not the full, horrifying distortion, but a suggestion of the face, swimming just beneath the surface of the reflection, a fleeting, almost transparent smear of familiar agony. I blinked, and it was gone, replaced by my own gaunt, wild-eyed image. But I had seen it, and the chill that ran down my spine wasn't from the cold steel. It was the realization that this thing, this presence, was no longer confined to the television. It was bleeding into my world, finding new surfaces, new conduits. I started collecting old photographs, boxes of them, searching, frantically, obsessively. I spread them across the floor, poring over every familiar smile, every forgotten memory, searching for the original form of that distorted visage. My parents, old friends, and then there she was, Emily. A picture from her high school graduation, vibrant, alive. A faint, unsettling echo stirred in the depths of my memory, a whisper of a forgotten detail, a half-formed thought. The lines of her smile, the curve of her jaw, it was a perfect match for the terrible familiarity I felt when looking at the distorted face. But I pushed it away. It couldn't be.
The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a living entity, its walls pressing in, its silence judgmental. Every shadow seemed to stretch, to writhe with unspoken accusation. I started leaving lights on, all of them, burning away the oppressive darkness, but the light only seemed to make the reflections clearer, the surfaces more treacherous. The paranoia was a suffocating blanket, tightening its grip with each passing hour. I know what you're thinking. I was losing my mind. Perhaps. But sanity, I've learned, is a fragile construct, easily shattered by the impossible. Then came the dreams. Not simple nightmares, but a continuation of the waking torment. I'd be in the living room, the television off, but the sound was deafening. A cacophony of white noise and distant, desperate pleas. And in the center of the dark screen, the face would coalesce, not just distorted, but screaming. A silent scream that tore through the fabric of my sleep, leaving me gasping, drenched in cold sweat. It was more vivid, more real than any dream should be. The features were sharpening, shedding their static veil, revealing the subtle contours of Emily's face beneath the terror. It was during one such harrowing awakening that I stumbled to the bathroom, desperate for water, for anything to wash away the taste of fear. I splashed cold water on my face, looking up into the mirror, expecting my own reflection. But for a split second, an eternity, the water dripping from my brow, the face that stared back at me wasn't mine. It was her face, Emily's, but ravaged, imbued with the same silent horror I'd seen on the screen. And in the same instant, in the fractured static that shimmered just behind my own eyes in the reflection, I saw it. The true, agonizing connection. The horror wasn't coming from the television. It wasn't a ghost in the wires. It was a projection, a manifestation. This wasn't haunting my house. It was haunting me. And the face, her face, was just the messenger for a truth I had desperately tried to bury deep within myself. A truth that was now broadcasting relentlessly from the darkest corners of my own mind. It was in that moment, staring into the mirroring horror, that I understood. The house was never haunted. I was. The reflection, distorted and agonizing, was a window not to a restless spirit, but to the fractured landscape of my own mind, a broadcast of my deepest, most agonizing regret. The static that shimmered behind her eyes, behind my eyes, was the noise of a truth clawing its way to the surface, demanding to be heard. And the whispers, the hum, the phantom television, they were not external signals, but the relentless internal static of a mind collapsing under the weight of its own unspoken horror. This was not an invasion from without, but an eruption from within. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat, the image of Emily's ravaged face superimposed over my own, a grotesque mockery of my features. The air in the bathroom grew heavy, thick with the scent of old dust and something else, something metallic and cold, like fear. The Gutera Constante from the faucet now hammered against the porcelain basin, each drop a relentless accusation. My eyes, wild and bloodshot, darted around the room, desperate for an escape, for distraction from the horrifying clarity that had just shattered my world. You know the feeling, don't you? That sickening lurch when the ground beneath you simply ceases to exist?
I fled the bathroom, not to escape the house, but to escape myself. The living room, once a place of mundane comfort, now felt like a stage set for my personal inquisition. The shrouded television in the garage called to me, a perverse siren song. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the answers lay not in destroying the object, but in confronting what it reflected. This wasn't a monster to be slain. It was a wound to be exposed. I tore through old boxes in the attic, desperate for any shred of memory, any forgotten artifact that could explain, could justify, could silence the broadcast. Old journals, photographs, Emily's childhood drawings. And then I found it, tucked away in a dusty photo album. Beneath layers of faded innocence was a small, grainy photograph. It was Emily, much younger, laughing, holding up a small, hand-painted wooden bird. And behind her, barely visible in the shadow, was a television. My television, the very one in the garage. And reflected in its dark, glassy screen was the distorted, screaming face. But it wasn't just the face anymore. Now I saw the details. The way the hair was swept back, the distinct line of her jaw, the unique curve of her lips. A mirror image of Emily, but trapped in a moment of pure, unadulterated terror. And then the true horror, the cosmic dread washed over me. It wasn't a reflection of what was. It was a reflection of then. A reflection from the past, caught in the inanimate object, waiting. The television wasn't just a conduit. It was a dark mirror, showing not what would be, but what had been. A frozen moment in time, forever replaying her final agonizing realization. I remembered the day I'd taken that photo. A seemingly innocent moment. Emily full of life, showing off her latest creation. I'd been distracted, impatient, eager to get back to my own meticulous world. She'd tried to tell me something, a frantic whisper about the television, about seeing something in the reflection. I'd dismissed it, told her she was imagining things, a child's overactive imagination. And then, hours later, the accident, the fall, the silence, the profound, inescapable guilt. The television in the garage now pulsed with an unbearable weight, drawing me to it. I ripped off the tarp, my hands raw, my mind screaming. The screen, once dark and cold, now pulsed with a faint internal light, a deep, bruised purple. And on it, the face, no longer static. It moved. Its eyes, wide with horror, darted from side to side, then fixed on me, and its lips, contorted in a silent stream, slowly, agonizingly began to form a word. Arthur. My name, but not spoken aloud. It was a silent, internal scream, reverberating directly inside my skull, a sound that bypassed my ears entirely, burrowing straight into the raw nerve of my guilt. There was no monster in the garage, no spectral entity to fight. Only the reflection of my own negligence, my own dismissal, my own crushing guilt, manifesting as her final terrifying moment. The truth was a blunt instrument, shattering the fragile sanctuary of my denial. Emily hadn't just fallen, she had been terrified, had seen something in that reflection, a premonition, a dark truth. And I, in my self-absorbed blindness, had ignored her, dismissed her, abandoned her to her fear. And now, she was showing me exactly what she had seen. My world didn't just collapse, it imploded, sucking me into the void of my own making. I still hear the broadcast every night. Not from the television, I smashed it into 1,000 irreparable pieces, but it made no difference. Now the static hums inside my very bones. The face appears in every reflective surface. My morning coffee, the polished wood of my desk, the dark pane of my window at night. Always Emily's face twisted in that silent scream, forever forming my name. The house is silent now, truly silent, but I can't breathe. I can never truly breathe again. The horror isn't what I saw. It's what I remembered. And what I remembered, it's still watching. Always.
Subscribe if you dare. Like or be swallowed by the darkness. Hurry before it's too late.